Why do we love Star Wars? The first group of Star Wars fans we want to address are the original. Folks who watched them on the living room floor, in their pajamas, or in the darkened theater, at a time in their life when the world was only just beginning to make sense. For folks who grew up watching Star Wars, some of the best supervision we ever had was from a wise old kook named Obi-Wan and a scary Sith named Darth Vader. And yet, despite what any of us original trilogy aficionados tell you, we didn't understand George Lucas's deep symbolism of the Empire and its Emperor, or how borrowing the centuries-old hero's journey story was an effective way to mold Luke's character as an underdog. We couldn't wrap their heads around the concepts of universal love, and we certainly couldn't appreciate the magnitude of and foresight needed to create a story arc that made the good guys lose in The Empire Strikes Back, and how that made the twist at the end of Return of the Jedi so much sweeter. Back then, when we were all just half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herders, all we understood was that lightsabers look cool. If you want the most basic of reasons why some of us like Star Wars, it's because the universe that so many creative hands have touched contains laser guns, spaceships, secret organizations that stretch back millennia, and monsters that both frighten and entertain in equal measure. This sounds like weak reasoning, I know, but in terms of pure aesthetics, Star Wars brings so much to the table. If you're watching Star Wars for the first time or are considering watching it for the first time, don't get caught up in the fine details of how Emperor Palpatine somehow climbed all the way to the top of the political ladder in less than 2 hours, or if Kira really has a thing for Han, or if she's just a pawn. And spend more time looking at the varied environments that never feel underdeveloped. Look at the cities that actually have a history and people, or aliens, that have their own culture, ambitions, and shortcomings. Take a good hard look at it here, because it's actually pretty darn hard to find anywhere else. You might have heard of other creative companies making a universe for their films or game developers that spend months crafting the perfect setting. But there's a good reason George Lucas coined the term Star Wars universe right at the onset. The man had a vision of what he wanted to create. It's hard to talk about the characters and plots of the films without ruining any of what makes them so special. I can't tell you what happens to Luke or why he's so pissed off at an 8 feet tall mechanical man. I guess I also can't tell you why Liam Neeson only made it through one film before getting forced out of the franchise. What I can tell you is that the original movies follow this guy, a kid really, named Luke. He lives on a farm in the middle of nowhere and isn't really all that exceptional at anything. He doesn't have many friends unless you count his soon-to-be deceased aunt and uncle and Biggs Darklighter. And his only goal in life is getting away from where he was born. Over the course of the next 2 films, you watch Luke struggle to make decisions, often failing with horrible consequences. He loses his hand, by the way. There are other characters, the roguish Han Solo with the spotty past, and the feisty, capable leader Princess Leia, who are great too. And in time, you'll come to relate to all of them in some capacity. They all exist in what we call the original trilogy. If you start with the newer trilogy that starts with The Phantom Menace, you'll pick up with 2 Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn, a handmaiden and a boy named Anakin Skywalker. There's another character named Jar Jar Binks, but just ignore him. While the later movies are a tale of heroism and overcoming the odds, the former are about the temptation of power and the lengths we go to when protecting the ones we love. Each are so important to the Star Wars world, and while every fan will have something they'd like changed, whether that's the existence of midichlorians or if Greedo shot first or second, it's better to spend less time looking at little details and take in the entire tapestry as a whole. To put it, why we all love Star Wars so much is because, like us, it never stopped growing, and that's really important. If you're someone reading this and think just because we've talked about the original trilogy so much that we don't absolutely adore the new film, you're wrong. We think films like Solo, Rogue One, and Episode 8 are just as good as anything that's come before them. We're not saying Episodes 7, 8, and 9 aren't without their weak spots, because boy, are there some issues, but they still offer valuable lessons on heroism and how failure as a teacher is exactly what students need to see. Heck, even parts we didn't like, Rose saving Finn, for example, we came to understand as necessary for a bigger plot arc. Sacrifice in war, don't forget, is a key theme in Star Wars. Similar points could be made for Solo and Rogue One, 2 movies that expand the cinematic universe without necessarily following the same formula we've seen 8 times before. These films, despite not following Lucas's template, allowed other filmmakers and different voices play in the sandbox that is the Star Wars universe and is so important for its growth and continuation for the next generation. And look, if you're just starting out with Star Wars, we encourage you to start anywhere you want. Whether that's Episode 1, the first film in the main franchise, or Episode 9, the most modern film in the franchise, or even the side stories, any place is a good spot. Star Wars films, we think everyone will agree, are by their very nature adventure stories, and adventures often have multiple beginnings. For the rest of the fandom out there, we could take the time to outline why Episode 8 needed to end like that. That's the way the Force works. Why Episode 9 succeeds in spite of its flaws. Why Rogue One introduces characters never seen anywhere else. That's the way espionage works. Why Solo is the most self-referential film of all time. But we won't, because that sets a precedent. That movies need to cater to us rather than live by their own ethos. On that note, the last reason we'll give about why we love Star Wars is that it reinvents itself, both in films and TV shows. But it's comics and games, books and fan fiction. It lives on in the hearts and minds of those who love it, cherish it, and eventually through the people who spread it on to the next generation. Hint, hint, that's what the next trilogy is all about. That said, for the fans out there who expect us to be angry at the franchise because it didn't do X, Y, or Z, or because Disney has been pushing to create more content in the universe, we're not that kind. And I'm not that kind of person. And with that said, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and we'll see you next time.